Hi Sewing Peeps, this is Janae King, and I just want to show you how to layer a quilt in order to spray baste so that you can quilt this on a home machine. So I have 3 layers to my quilt. So just imagine that this is a huge quilt, and I'm going to show you in miniature because the process is completely the same whether it's for something big or small, and hopefully this will explain how to layer and spray baste. So I have my 3 layers. I have my backing, which is the green fabric. I have a layer of cotton batting. I like just to use like Warm and Natural or something 100% cotton, and it's a little bit thinner. So, and then this one is just my quilt top, the blue. So first off, I'm going to take my backing fabric and lay it down on a surface, and it's going to be wrong side up. So, of course, if this is a big quilt, I'm going to lay this out onto the floor and crawl around and try to do this on the floor. So it's totally doable. It does work better if you have somebody help you, obviously because of the size. So lay this out on the floor, and using some blue painter's tape, you are going to tape the corners of your quilt to the floor. I will tell you that this step will save your life, okay? I have seen so many people struggle with layering a quilt because the layers don't want to stay put. So this is a way to keep them laying flat and staying put. So go ahead and pull the fabric taut and put the tape in each corner so it's just nice and smooth. And then you're going to take the batting layer. Now let me tell you a little trick. You're going to choose one corner of the backing to be your point of reference. So I'm going to actually choose this back corner as my point of reference for laying down the cotton batting. So I'm going to take it, and using this back corner, I will lay my batting on top of the backing and smooth it out, okay? Smooth it out so that this corner back here, or whichever corner you choose, is those edges are going to be even and matching. And the reason why I do that is because let's say your batting is king size and your quilt top is only twin size. So you would not want to take your twin size quilt top and lay that down right in the middle, because you're going to lose a bunch of extra batting all the way around the edges. So you're going to want to take your quilt top, no matter what size it is, and lay it down in that corner, whichever one you designated as the point of the corner of reference, and you're going to lay down your quilt top closest to that corner, okay? So that you're probably going to have extra quilt batting and backing all the way around on those other edges, those other 3 edges. And so these will be matching for the most part up in here. Now here's something you need to think about when you're doing your layering. If you are going to spray baste this or pin baste, doesn't matter, you need to have at least 2 inches extra of your batting and your backing all the way around on each edge. So when you put this top, your quilt top down in the corner, make sure that you can still see some of the backing and the batting around the edges, about 2 inches. Because as you quilt this, you want to leave some extra around the edges of the backing and the batting so that if the top travels a little bit, you are going to have some extra backing and batting for it to land on, okay? So if you cut all 3 of these layers to the exact same size on all four sides, and then you start quilting it and something shifts, you won't have any extra on the back to for that quilt top to travel onto. I hope that makes sense. But so because I'm going to quilt this on a home machine, I can leave about 1 inch to 2 inches around all four sides, and that should give me plenty of room, especially if you spray baste it, because spray basting is such a sure way of keeping the layers put. Okay, when you pin baste a quilt top, that is entirely different. I think that your quilt has the possibility of shifting a lot more. So my favorite way of basting a quilt together is using a spray. And my favorite spray is the 505 Spray and Fix temporary adhesive spray. So I hope you can see that. And I will definitely make note of that in the comments so that you know which product I am using today. So I am going to spray baste all my quilt layers with this spray. So the way I would do that, now just imagine if this is a big quilt and it's laying out on the floor. You're going to take the top 2 layers, your quilt top and your batting, and you're going to fold it back halfway. Okay, so you've exposed half of the backing. You're going to take your spray, okay, shake it up good, and you're going to spray onto the batting. So the reason why I spray onto the batting is because I just don't like the idea of spraying it onto the fabric. I don't want to open up the potential of having spots or any of the adhesive showing through my fabric. I've never really ever had that happen, but I don't like spraying the fabric. So I always spray the half of the batting. So I'm going to pick up the batting only, and I'm going to lay that down onto my backing fabric, and you want to pat it. Okay? Just pat it. Because if you were to take your hands, and especially on a big quilt, and you just pressed that out to the corners, there's potential for it to wrinkle up. And then you can always pull this up and reposition it, but it pulls at your fabric and it gets messy. So you just want to pat that down. Okay, I'm going to take my spray again. I'm going to spray the top. Now I'm only using short spurts because this is really small, but you can actually do long sprays onto your batting. You just want to make sure that you have sprayed it and given it all a good, just one thin layer. Okay, I always pay extra attention in the corners because I don't want those corners coming up. So you're going to take your quilt top and you're going to lay it down and you're going to pat it. Now let me tell you something. This is where the spray really comes in handy. If your quilt top has some spots in it that were sewn with just a little bit of a bump to it, or let's say some of your blocks were just a little bit wonky or didn't lay flat completely, I love the spray because it will smooth out some of those spots and it will actually kind of hide some of those imperfections. So what I do is I just pat it down in those spots where maybe it's raised up a little bit and didn't get laid down. I also can straighten out blocks that maybe are just not quite perfectly square. So that's another good reason to use the spray. So now what we're going to do is go over to the other side and we're going to pull it back halfway, and you'll be able to tell where there's resistance, and that is where we stopped with the spray on the first step. So I'm going to spray the batting again I'm going to lift the batting up and I'm going to lay it down. Now this is where, you know, if you're doing this on a huge quilt on the floor, you would have somebody on both sides where my hands are. You would have somebody else helping you, and you could both lay this down, and as you lay it down, you can kind of walk this down and flatten it out. Now, if you don't have somebody to help you, it's still doable to do it on your own. You might stand behind the quilt and lift it up and lay it down yourself. It does work, so rest assured that you can do this if you are home alone. So I'm going to spray the back of the batting on this side. I'm going to pick up my quilt top. I'm going to slowly and carefully lay that down and pat it down. And now my layers are all securely glued together. I don't really like using the word glued, but they are basically. So this method for taping your backing and laying it out can also be used for pin basting. I just don't ever use pins anymore because the spray is such a wonderful product. This one in particular will not gum your sewing machine needle, and one small bottle actually goes a long ways. So now all of my layers are together, and actually, if I needed to, I could throw this over a chair and it would be all stuck together like this when I come back to it a week, 2 weeks later. Now, if you were to leave this, let's say maybe, I don't know, 6 months, it might start to come apart a little bit. But you know, you can always reapply some of the spray in the corners and stick it back together and it'll work just fine. So I hope that gives some explanation on how to use spray. It's super easy and super fast. And now I would be able to take this to my sewing machine and I would be able to actually start anywhere on the quilt and quilt my quilt. So it used to be, and especially it still is with pin basting, you would need to start quilting in the center of your quilt and work out, because you don't want to end up with a big bunch of fabric in the middle if you've started from the outside. But with spray basting, you can start on the outside of your quilt and go in towards the center, which actually is another plus to spray basting. So be sure and follow me here on my channel. I'm going to be putting more videos up in the future, and I have a website called Bobbins and Bolt. You can find me there as well with some products in my shop. Happy sewing!